We're going to do a couple of workshops over the next couple of months. The first one that we've already done is me and my budget, and today we're going to be on me and my debt. The other workshops will be on me and my income. It'll be in ways on how you can work on the side of your budget that's not part of your expenses. Then we'll be looking at your savings, which is a key component of a financial plan. Me and my bank, how you can structure your interactions with institutions like banks. We'll be discussing things like cryptocurrencies, what they are about, so keeping it up to date. I'm showing you the different tools that are available within our modern society that you can manage your money better. Then finally, me and my insurance. We're going to show you that insurance is not just a grudge purchase, it's an essential purchase. It's part of what you need as part of a structured financial plan. And lastly, we'll be looking at me and my future. The most exciting workshop, the one that I'm most passionate about, is about investing. Looking at the different options and vehicles that are available to increase the money that you've got, to see that compound interest can start working for you so that you can achieve the goals that we just wrote down. So today we are on Get Out of Debt Fast. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at firstly on where you're at, what the different types of debts are, and then we'll be moving along towards how do you get out of debt. And I've sort of adjusted the workshop today to take into account what Mariette said the last time that we were here, that as you guys are estate agents, you need to be spending a little bit of money to be making money. So we'll be focusing on those types of things as well, and looking at how you can utilize what you have available to ensure that you get out of debt. How does the journey start? It starts with assessing your finances. So once again, out of a workshop of about the same number of people, I've only had 5 completions. Please go and complete the plan. We'll send the link via email on your groups, whatever. You can just click on it and do it. It takes 15 minutes of your time, and it gives you a 40-page financial plan. If you choose not to share that plan, no one will speak to you, no one will contact you. It's just something for yourself, and you can redo it whenever you want to. It's something that most financial advisors charge you a lot of money for, or want to sell you a product for. So this is something you get free of charge, something to give you a dipstick of where you're at. If you went to a doctor and the doctor just prescribed you Panado without checking what's going on, would you go back to that doctor?
Yes.
Same thing with your finances. If I don't look at you, assess you, send you for blood work, understand what's going on, none of it's going to make sense. It's basically me prescribing Panado for a tummy ache. And I can't do that if you don't assess your current financial situation. The next part of the plan is making a debt reduction plan. Once you've done your net worth calculation, so we'll be looking at that as a key component of today's workshop. Then we'll start with reducing your short-term debt, move on to long-term debt, and then the conclusion. The conclusion should be that you should be out of debt. In practice, in modern society, we know that being completely out of debt is not necessarily an achievable goal, but at least keeping it down to something that's generating money is where we want to get you at. So get you away from those short-term bad debts with lots of interest rates that you're spending on day-to-day expenses, things that you don't really need, things that are taking away money that you could be investing. The borrower is a servant to the lender. Does that sound good? Do you want to be a slave? Because that's what you are if you're in debt to the debtor. He puts down the terms, she puts down the terms, and you just have to accept it. There's nothing you can do about it. And if you're in that position, there's no negotiating power, there's no achieving the goals and dreams that we've just talked about, that we've just written down. So keep that in mind. Keep that sort of where you want to go always in mind when you're making those sacrifices. That's why I wanted you to write down today. So the next time that we'll be here, I'm going to create a board that will be your goal board for the next of the couple of workshops. Your ticket will be on that board to understand that that's what we're working towards. That's where you want to go. That's the goal of making these sacrifices for. And I'm going to take some of the papers today and see how some of you have thought about it. Maybe some of you thought about borrowing money to buy that new car or whatever the case might be. But I'm going to show you that you can do it the other way around, but by not being a slave to someone else's whims and thinking. So once again, there's Mary. Mary is a single employed upwardly mobile person. What upwardly mobile means, she's aspirational. She's still got goals that she wants to achieve. She's got things that she wants to do. So for instance, she wants to be a saxophone player at night. She wants to take tango lessons. She wants to buy a new car so that she can do breakfast runs and all of the cool things that there are available. So she owns a car, but like I said, she wants a new one. She recently bought her first property, so she's got 2 points of debt already. She has 2 credit cards, a personal loan, and loves her store cards. So out of those things, there are things that should be sounding warning bells and alarm bells. So if you're in the same position as Mary, you're not in a great position. I'm worried. The diagnosis is not what I wanted it to be, for a couple of reasons. At the end of today, I'll show you why that is the case. So Mary is struggling to deal with debt and desperately needs a plan to get out from under the burden of debt. So what is debt? Debt is the amount you owe to a person or organization for the funds, money, you have borrowed. There is an intent to pay back the amount borrowed. It usually involves repayment terms and paying interest on the money borrowed. The last line is the important part of what good financial planning is about. The repayment terms and the amount of interest that you pay. That's 2 key components. So I want you to always look at, when you take on debt, when you look at your debt, you need to know how long you're going to take to repay it. So a lot of people take out credit card debt with no intention of ever paying it back because they've not decided on when I'm going to pay it back. So those are the types of debts that you don't want. Something that you think is part of your cash flow, but it's not your money. So keeping yourself continuously in a debt cycle because you're not thinking about this debt as something that I have to repay. The definition, purely part of the definition, says it involves repayment terms. So the agreement on your credit cards and store cards will have one of these terms in it, even though you think I can just keep it into perpetuity. So I can just keep on having that debt on my books. What is credit? It's the money you have already borrowed and you're paying interest on. Credit is what you are permitted to borrow. I want you to look at the word permitted. You're allowed, but I want to say that's a no-go. It's always only in an essential part of a plan. You know what your interest rate is, you know what you're going to pay back and how long you're going to pay it back. So if you're buying something today on your credit card and you don't actually have that funds, I want you to first answer that question that I've just asked. When are you going to repay it? And what's the interest rate on it before you spend it? Every single time you take on debt, if it's easy, doesn't mean it's good. If you're allowed, if the banks are giving you credit, doesn't mean it's good. In South Africa, most people can't do the things, these goals that I'm talking about, because they don't look at credit in the way that I've just explained it. Our Credit Act is bad. People can get a lot of credit that they shouldn't be getting, and that's why I want to motivate you. Your debt to income ratios, that's part of the financial plan that we've designed for you. If it's not within the ranges that we've said, then you're not using your debt in a good way. You're not managing it in a way so that you can achieve that upwardly mobile, that aspirational things that you wanted to achieve. because debt is expensive. The interest rates that you could get, the investment value that you could get out of something, hovers between 10 and 15%, where most interest rates hover between, for short-term credit, between 15 and 25%. So if you take on too much debt without having a strategy in mind, you will always continuously be in that debt cycle. What is a debtor and what is a debtee? A debtor is an entity who owes a debt to another entity, also referred to as a borrower or a debtor. Can be an individual, organization, or a company. And a debtee, entity to whom the debt is owed, also referred to as a lender or creditor. Can be a bank, supplier, company, or person that has provided the funds and credit. I just give this as a jargon background because a lot of people don't do the things that I've just mentioned because they shy away from a long contract or they don't understand the terms. So I'm now giving you exactly what these terms are so that when you take on debt, when you make these debt agreements, you understand what they are all about. So what is good debt? Without looking at the board, what is good debt? Is investment in your financial future. No negative impact on your overall financial position. It's realistic and affordable with a realistic and affordable payment plan. If you can't answer all three of those questions on any of the debt that you have, it's bad. So if you look at your own sort of life, if you ask yourself those questions on the debts that you have, can you answer them? An investment in your financial future, so that was the easy part. All of you almost got that. That's a house, that's building your career, looking further at it. But if it's a house that you can't afford, no negative impact on your financial position, it's not a good debt. It needs to be part of a plan and it needs to be affordable on your current levels of income. Drains your wealth, not affordable, offers no real prospect of paying for themselves in the future. So that's once again the key component that I want you to look at. All of your debts needs to be assessed in a category of what is good and what is bad. And those are the three questions. Simple enough. Like I said at the beginning, if you've got a credit card and the bank allows you to borrow 100,000 Rand, doesn't mean you can afford it. They want you to be in a continuous debt cycle. They make money on it. We don't want that. So for yourself, when are you going to repay it? What's the interest rate? Is it part of the plan? And can you afford it? It's the question that you should be asking every time you buy something with money that is not yours. So for instance, in your guys' context, a good debt would be something spending on marketing, on selling an additional property. You've got a reasonable prospect if you work hard to return that debt, and it would make sense to be spending more money on that. But I would prefer if that's not money that you borrow. I would prefer that's money that you've saved. If we could get to that place. Different types of debt. Long-term and short-term debt. A short-term debt is something that's in the interim. They put different types of dates on that. I'm not going to do that. It could mean different things for different people. Microloans, the worst part of the debt that they could be, the most expensive in the market. So just running through these terms to show you a little bit what I would immediately classify as something that I would not be touching. Payday loans, bad, means that the income that you've bargained for, that you've budgeted for, you're already giving a little bit of it away. A business loan, that would be a debt that I would take on. Starting a new business, creating something that there's a reasonable prospect of returning that value makes sense. So in your context, if you're using it to build your practice, to sell more houses, that would make sense to me. That's something that I could potentially qualify as a good debt. But once again, asking those three questions that I asked at the beginning. Personal loan. That means you haven't budgeted. That's what that says to me. You've not done what I've asked you to do in the previous workshop. You've not looked at what there is and what you should be spending on. So once again, there are people that are engaging. that is making a plan to better themselves. Once again, go and complete your financial plan, have an understanding of where you are at, then you shouldn't be in loans. If you've already got loans, don't just sit here the whole workshop stressing now about all the debt that you've got. Listen to what I'm saying. We're going to give you a strategy of getting out of it, of removing and looking at your plan and having a debt reduction plan so that you in future can also look at it as something that you want. Car loan is something that you need. Once again on cars, someone mentioned that they think that's a good debt. I've been in multiple workshops where people think a car is a good investment. It's not an investment. It's not good for you. If you can ride a bike, ride a bike. It's better value for money. I get you, but a Uno can do that as well. But I understand that you work in an aspirational type of market and business, and image is something that's important. But personally, in the industry that I work for, if I'm buying something from someone and they're driving a Ferrari, then I'm sort of, aren't they taking a hell of a lot of my money? And is that the best value for money that I could be getting? It's a question that I ask myself immediately. Yeah, exactly. And that's something that you have to manage within your own finances. So driving a decent vehicle that's clean and well looked after makes sense, but driving a car just because it makes you feel good, not necessarily the best plan if you're already in debt. Then there's home loans. We've spoken about that. That's a good idea. Credit and store cards. The only time that I think it's worthwhile to have a store card is if they give you points and you're paying in money into that account and buying it with your own cash. The only time that I think a card like that is great. Or they've got great or fantastic terms. But most people can't tell me what the terms on their store cards are. If you can't tell it to me offhand, cut it up tonight. Then there's student loan for those of you that are looking at furthering their qualifications, becoming better qualified, because this will add value. I always tell people on that is make sure that the juice is worth the squeeze. If you're spending money on bettering your qualification, you need to be able to answer a couple of questions. You need to know that it will definitely increase your income. It will give you definitely more opportunities. So for instance, in my line of work, if I'm very passionate about flowers and I'm taking a course on how to do bouquets and I'm spending 50,000 Rand to make a nice flower arrangement, I don't think that's going to help me a lot. That's a hobby. Something that you want to do. It's not something that's going to help you necessarily. So be hard on yourself. Look at your things in a way that you can answer the questions, that the juice is worth the squeeze. Bank overdraft. Oh, terrible. Terrible, 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 terrible. Once again, no one ever knows what their interest rates are because they just know they have it and they don't have to worry about signing papers or documents. It's easy to spend the money that the bank is giving you so freely. Why do they give it to you so freely? Because they're making money off it. Secured and unsecured debt that you would understand. Do you tie some assets to it? So for instance, in the industry that you are, you know secured debt quite well. You sign a bond is secured debt. Unsecured debt is something that they can't take anything for the money that you've borrowed. We've gone through the different types of debts. Once again, we've now discussed what the goals are. We've written them down. But I want to motivate you once again. I'll make sure that at the end of the day, on the emails, the link is sent out again, and that all of you complete, click on it, do the plan. All of the components, all 7 of the workshops we are going to do, gets addressed in a personal way in that plan. And for those of you that have completed it and don't understand how that makes sense, please give me a call so that I can take you through it. And then you can maybe read to it to understand how these components tie into the different strategies and plans that we are putting into place. Once again, the journey. How do you assess your finances? Once again, that's the link. Complete it, look through it. there's a net worth calculator. We put in the ratios that the bank actually uses to calculate on your net worth, the money that you've actually got, if you'll be able to get debt. People don't understand it. So a lot of people say, why don't I get 100% bond? Because my credit record's bad. Yeah, your credit record's bad because you thought I needed to get credit to have a credit record. You don't need to do that. That's questions that you start asking now before you take on debt, not after you've already done it. Get the assessment done. It takes you 15 minutes. 15 minutes in a whole day before you go to bed. Know where you're at. Once again, how do we calculate it? It's assets minus liabilities. I'm not going to go into that. We do it for you. If you've got questions, we can do that after you've completed your plan and looked at the different components of it. This is how it will look. It's page 17 of your financial plan. We go in exact detail how we got to the numbers, what the different components are of what those asset sheet is all about, what the ratios are the banks are looking at. And we explain what your target should be in terms of that calculation. Your assets, your bank accounts, your retirement accounts, your real estate, your vehicles, your shares, your personal belongings. Your liabilities is installment loans, your lines of credit, the debt that you have on the different things that you have. And like I said, once again, I can spend a lot of time on what the different components are, but it's as easy as just taking the time to complete the questionnaire that we've given you, and we pop it out and populate it for you. So you don't have to do anything, it's easy. You can ask the guys that have done it. It's not like it's rocket science, it's just putting in some numbers. So how do we get rid of the debt? So now we've done the assessment, we know we're in trouble, like Mary. And Mary is standing in the shop and she's wondering, okay, should I take on that extra store card? And now we're saying no, we can't, because we first have to understand. So now she's got the plan, she's got these goals that we've talked about. So let's pull one. Okay, this person wants a car. And they've decided that they haven't written it down, but they want a car within a year. However, I've not written down how they're going to get it. So anyone want to help me? How do you get this car?
Take buy cash.
Save up for the deposit.
Okay, save up for a deposit is a good start. Buy cash would be great, but a year is not a lot of time to get the cash for a car, so the deposit might be.
Get it right.
Well done. Well done. That's what I want to hear. So once again, there's a narrative story that's achievable.
What we cheese by
Okay, so most people would buy a car with some debt. But now we need to understand how can you take on this debt. Because there is cases where you can take on debt to achieve the goals that you want to do. So that's with starting with a plan. So how do we create this plan? A plan will help you climb out of the financial hole and prevent you from sliding back in. Don't get overwhelmed, just persist, be persistent, and chip away at the debt bit by bit. Stay focused on the solutions given to you in this workshop. Sorry, that's a typo from my side. Instead of dwelling on the problems. Factors to consider when taking on an additional, and that's where you look at, is it something that you can achieve? So how do you determine that good or bad debt? You look at the interest rate on the financing option. So how does it fit in? How are you going to repay? What the repayment terms of this debt that you're taking on? Your net worth. How does it fit in within the bigger scheme of what you already have on hand? So for instance, if you've already got a car, why are you buying a second one? And can you afford it? If you can, some people can afford 10 cars. It's possible. But you need to know what it is in the context. And then comfort level with risk. So make sure that it's something that even if the worst case scenario happens. So you're earning 30 grand a month quite easily at the moment, but have you taken into account that this December is a bad month, not selling a lot of properties? Have you taken account that you won't have that income in that month? Have you made those types of plans? So don't live on the edge. So in that calculation that we do, if you're under that 36%, if you're close to it, I would think carefully about taking on new debt. And then also consider, so on the positive side, also consider your future income levels. If you've got deals coming through and you're going to make a lot more, then it's something that you can consider. So you could potentially be taking on more debt because you've got the strategy in place. So then write down and compare all your debt. A lot of people forget about a lot of things that they do. If someone calls you over the phone wanting to sell you something, put down the phone. Ask them to send it to you in email in writing so that you know what you're buying. That's one of the things that I can definitely tell people to do, because people forget about the debit orders under 100 Rand on their account because they look at the text messages that are coming through and never check what's going on. And online shopping, try to avoid it. It's like going to a store when you're hungry. You buy a lot of stuff that you don't need. Because just buying means you've not looked at the different options where you could get it cheaper because it's easy and convenient. You've not fitted it. Do you really need it? So once you know that you physically need to buy something, then go and use the vehicles that are available. But be careful on not just taking on different types of things within the context of your financial situation. Then also look at the things that you do buy. So for instance, like I said, I'm a big fan of music, so I subscribe to about 3 or 4 services digitally to listen to different types of music. But they offer better payment plans if I pay in advance. So instead of paying 8,000 Rand for it, I'm now paying 4,000 Rand for it because I've saved and I know that this is an expense that I'm going to take on and I pay in advance. So go and look at your financial position in detail. So she knew that the interest rate of her store card is 20%. Usually there's an escalation clause. So the first 5,000 there's a 20%, then it escalates. Luckily we've got the National Credit Act that sort of limits them on charging really bad interest rates, but know exactly each one of your debts, what the interest rate is and when you're going to repay it. And write it down in that context. From the one that you're going to repay next month to the one that you're going to pay in 30 years. Don't add to the pile. Okay? So before you've done all of the things that I've mentioned today, you're not allowed to take on any debt. And that's my challenge for today. So we've got the savings challenge. I'm going to ask you the next time that we're in a workshop, who's taken on more debt? And I count everything. So if you use your credit card, you've taken on debt. So from the moment you work out of this this workshop, if you take on any debt, you forfeit the reward that you've made with savings. So buying that meal is going to become easier. That's why I said I was very giving in buying meals for everyone. Okay, so part of your debt reduction plan is the first thing that you do is the first debt that you've put down, the first thing that you need to pay with the highest interest rate, you start with those. Start with the dangerous debts. So outstanding tax, child support, any litigation costs, all of that. That's the first debt that you start with paying. That's the first chip off the block, the first thing that you look at. Then take care of debt in default or in collection, so something that you're going to get a bad credit record on. It's the next debt that you look at of repaying. And then give priority to loans or lines of credit with the highest interest rates. Okay, so you group your debts according to these strategies that I'm giving you. So this is the first 3 things that you group. And you start with them and start with a plan on how you're going to repay that. Next, you tackle your long-term debt. Never pay off your long-term debt for a more toxic short-term debt. So people will tell me, but I've got a mortgage and the bank will foreclose and I'll get a bad credit record and whatever the case might be. Once you've got the complete debt reduction plan, so you've got a complete strategy in place, you know exactly what it's looking at, we'll get you some strategies where you can, because it's long-term debt, it's something that you can negotiate, renegotiate, and refinance. So you then shift your debts potentially between long and short-term debt. But once again, never repay long-term debt before you've looked at every single part of your short-term debt. Rank from highest to lowest in interest rates, tackle debt with the highest interest rate first. So if you've done all your short-term debt, this is the strategy for your long-term debt. Okay, if you don't understand, ask for help. You can ask me any question. I'll answer it, I'll help, I'll guide, I'll take you through it. There's debt practitioners right through South Africa, they have to help you. So if you don't understand, if it seems too daunting, there's no problem big enough. There is a way of solving it. I mean, there's even regulations coming into South Africa that your debt needs to be written off. But you can only write off debt that you know about and you understand that you've got a plan for. So you have to start with the assessment and start with the plan. Find the right plan. Option 1, pay off debt with the highest interest first. Option 2, pay off debt with the smallest balance first. Pay off your oldest debt first. Pick a strategy. Start with that. Small steps. How do you eat a whale? Little by little. Okay, so how do you do that short-term reduction steps that I've discussed? Budget and track. So that's why we did budgeting first. We've only got 5 people that has done it budget, so can't continue a conversation without you doing it. So you have to do your budget. Work on a spending plan. Decide what is wants and what is needs. A need is something that you can't live without, or want is something that you can, but you think you can't. So I'll give you an example. You need food, but you don't need takeaways. Okay, so remember that. Make cuts where possible. Like Mariette said, for everyone that's unique. It looks different. So if your income level is based on you spending a little bit of money, then that's not something that I want you to be cutting on. But there are things that you can be cutting on. There are luxuries that all of us spend money on that is not necessary. We've got a disposable income creation tool within the financial plan that calculates how a little sacrifice, 10 Rand a day, can make a massive difference over a couple of years. And see that as a challenge for yourself. You could be making yourself a millionaire by just saving as little as 10 Rand a day. And that comes down to not buying the takeaway coffee, not smoking less. And I know it's a tough subject for the smokers, but if there's someone that can show me a study anywhere in the world that says that smoking is essential and you need it and you need to be doing it, then sorry, it's a luxury. Increase your income. So you guys are all in the same industry. How have you increased your income in the last year? Help some of your colleagues out. What have you done? You can liquidate assets. So sell some stuff. You can raise cash. How you can do it? Do a yard sale. Sell unused vehicles, unused furniture at antique dealers, or unused electronics. Social media and internet sites makes it quite easy to start making money off things that you don't use, that you can't use. Then looking at hobbies. So his hobby is trading, but I just had an exceptional sort of corporate client. They were a call center agent, and they've literally quadrupled their income from just making food at the office. Started selling it. And great story. They're most likely going to not be a call center agent anymore. So the people that got me to give the financial training is quite mad at me because they're losing a good employee, but that person has bettered their financial situation. So look at yourself as a complete picture. You look at use all your talents, how you can use it to generate some extra money. Get rid of credit card debt. We've gone into that in quite some detail. Using your credit card to your benefit. She explained some of the ways that you could do it. Making sure that you understand those interest terms and those repayment terms. So that's the one thing. Get the information to make good decisions. Settle and negotiate your debt. So that's something that all of us can look at a little bit better. So once again, if you've got bad short-term debt, you can consolidate that into your mortgage, and that's something that you can do quite easily and negotiate. So refinance, replan your debt strategy so that all your debt is at a level that is manageable, so that it's at an interest rate that makes sense, so that you don't pay more than you need to. There is no downside to settle to modify your debt. So if you negotiate well, that's something that could work really well for you. What tips that I can give you for negotiating that? Don't be afraid. Most of the banks want you to come to them and make the term longer, renegotiate and chat. Don't be afraid. Don't run away from creditors. They, at the end of the day, want their debt repaid. So not pick up the phone when they're calling you. Don't ignore the letter of demand that you're getting sent. Face the problem head on. Be polite, don't get emotional, take detailed notes, know exactly what the information is that they want from you, let them know you really want to work something out, make a low offer and expect to negotiate. But you can only do that if you've done the assessment, if you know where you're at, what the different debts are that you have. Optimizing your debt, like I said, that is shifting the short-term debt into long-term debt, making sure that you consolidate it and you pay it at the best payment terms that you could get as an individual. Something that that works quite well. In terms of optimizing your debt, if your husband or wife has a better credit record, try to look at how you can consolidate it, use the better credit terms. If you've got a family member that's willing to help, if you've got an employer that's willing to help, all of that types of things. But that is something that you can only do if you know exactly what your debt is valued at and how you're going to repay it and what the interest rates are on it. Reducing your long-term debt. Be strategic about long-term debt. That's the unfortunate thing about going on a mortgage. It's not something that you can quickly cancel or quickly get rid of. So be very careful before you take on that debt. Do your financial plan. Put your financial strategy in context of all your assets, make sure that you understand what it's all about, have all the information at your fingertips. It's the only way that you can really help yourself. Refinancing, like I said, renegotiating with the bank. Certain types of debts are cheaper, older loans are on weird terms, the banks might have special offers, discounts or anything like that. So that's something that you have to assess and reassess every year. I know it's a step, I know it's hard work, but that's the same thing with your financial products. I come to most people, then they have an insurance policy with, for instance, Discovery. But Discovery changed their products in the year since you've had your product. So if you're not assessing at it and looking at it in terms of what they have available today, you might be paying more than what you need to be paying. And that's the same thing with loans. All of your financial components of your life need to be assessed continuously and need to be negotiated continuously. Mortgage modification, we've discussed that. Forbearance. Okay, so that is something, like I said, if you've seen I've got too much short-term debt, that's something that's available. You can pause your mortgage. There is provision in a lot of long-term debt plans that you can negotiate with your bank. Remember, it remains an agreement and you can say, I'm not going to pay for 3 months. For these 3 months, I'm going to use the 10,000 Rand that I'm spending on my mortgage and I'm going to repay all my bad short-term debts. And that's something that I can't know. I don't know what your mortgages look like, if you've got mortgages, if you're renting property. But the same thing applies with the person that you're renting a property from. You guys would know better than I do that if you go to someone and says, I can't afford your rent anymore, they would rather take someone that pays 1,000 Rand less than not do it. And it's something that you have to do from your side. No one is just going to come to you and say, okay, great, you're going to get a cheaper rental agreement. Okay, paying it down early. And that's something that you also have to calculate. Look at the terms. So a lot of people ask, okay, so if I've got a mortgage for 30 years, then I should be paying it in 20. That's something that you have to calculate. You have to look at what the terms of your agreement are. In this example, it did not make sense, or it does make sense. I can't remember which one that I used. Okay, so that reduces the term to 23 years. So sometimes it makes sense. So you want to get rid of your debt quite sooner because you're closer to retirement and you want to make sure that I've paid off my mortgage. Then you say, okay, great, I calculated and I know now that this is what I need to be repaying each month additionally to get rid of that debt. So that's the question of the investment. Should I be taking on an investment or should I be taking on a debt? You calculate it and you see which one is going to benefit you the most or not. Student loans, for those of you that still have student loans, it's basically the same principle, it's just a different type of debt, but it's something that I'm quite happy to have. Like I said, it's a good debt. Consider consideration. A lot of people have at different banks, different times, different institutions. Make sure that it's at the lowest interest rate. They're quite willing to negotiate that and to consolidate that. And does your employer have any student loan benefits? And automate your payments. That's something that I can motivate everyone to do. Know exactly that this is the amount that I'm going to pay each month and this is how I'm going to get rid of the debt in that amount of time. Okay, in conclusion, the golden rule is pay yourself first. What does that mean? Have an amount that goes off into a savings account each and every month. That you know is there, it's cash that you can spend and you can use for different things. Before you do anything, once you've now done all of the strategy, you've done the debt reduction plan so that you don't get into the same position, the golden rule of finances is pay yourself first. And how do you pay yourself? You invest money. You've got cash put away. You've got something that you don't use up. Okay, automate your savings, it's an easy way to do it. So open an investment account. So I'm going to give you this as the best advice. So the best investment vehicle that is available for everyone and it's really cheap, it's a tax-free savings account. Most financial institutions offer it. Don't go to a financial planner, it's not worth it. They charge additional fees for it because it's regulated. Don't pay them for that extra 0.5%, and I'm an advisor myself, so I'm giving you this as what it is. They charge an additional 0.5% on your investment. So tax-free savings is not necessary to do. You can go to any of the financial institutions and most of them will have a guaranteed return vehicle. So go to the one that's got the best guaranteed return and which institution is the most trusted. So for instance, we use Fairtree as an asset manager. You use their guaranteed income return and you know that you will be getting anything between 10 and 11% interest on that vehicle. And 33,000 Rand a month tax free. So all the gains that you make into that account, you're not taxed on and the growth is there and available for you. Go and sign that, automate that and have that available. Remember that if you remove the funds, you lose that tax benefit. So it's also a way of making sure that you keep that money invested and don't spend it on things that are not needed. If any of you've got any struggles or questions with that, you're welcome to contact me so that we can have a discussion. Review the plan. Widen the gap between the money you make and the money you spend. That's basically the takeaway of the 7 steps that I want you to remember. Take control. Okay, remember, take control. Know your net worth. Increase your income. Decrease your expenses. Optimize debt. Negotiate settlements. Keep an emergency fund. Automate payments and pay yourself first. 7 steps. It's easy. If you just take one thing away from today, remember these 7. Gone into what your credit profile is all about. You're most in control of your destiny when you're in control of your money. Taking control of your debt is ultimately what gives you power over it. Okay, cool. We'll send you out the financial plan and make sure all of you get it. Please complete it for our next workshop. Thank you very much for your time.